Hello and welcome to one and all. In today's class, we will check out the next 5 marks question in inflation, that is causes of inflation. Okay, so this is SAQ 40, identify the causes of inflation. So answer, you have to write the meaning of inflation. As usual, the previous class itself, I have explained what is the meaning of inflation. That is a continuous rise in the general price level, that is over a long period of time. That is what is known as the inflation. So inflation, a continuous rise in general price level, is caused by three reasons. The first one is excess demand, second one shortage of supply, and third one increased cost of production. So these are all the main reasons due to which the inflation is occurring in a particular country. So let us check out one by one what are all the reasons, what is the connection between those causes and inflation. Okay, so the first one, factors causing increase in the aggregate demand for commodities. Aggregate demand is total demand. So if the total demand for the commodities is more than the total supply, then there will be inflation. We all know that whenever the demand for a commodity or service is more than its supply, automatically the price will increase. So if this happens for the total demand, if the demand for all the commodities and services is more than the total supply of all the commodities and services, then the general price level in the country will increase, and that results in inflation. Now let us check out what are all the reasons that the total demand for a commodity keeps on increasing. So the first and foremost one, point A, high rate of population growth. So if the birth rate or if the growth rate of population keeps on increasing in a country, there will be a rise in, generally there will be a rise in demand for all the commodities. So that will lead to rise in the price level. Second one, increase in non-plan and plan expenditure of the government, including for welfare programs. So we all know that the government incurs huge amount of expenditure. So the volume of money circulation in the country will increase enormously. It can be the plan expenditure which the government is allotting every year financially the budget, or it can be the non-plan expenditure. So many unexpected emergencies happen for which the government has to incur the expenditure. And also we all know that the government is incurring huge expenditure to provide the welfare services to all the poorer sections of the population. So the money is being transferred in huge amounts from the government sector to the general population. So the people are having more and more amount of money income now. Okay, so or the money income is distributed to so many sections of the population in the country now. So which leads to rise in the demand for the commodities. But unfortunately, the supply of the commodities, it will take quite some period of time to increase the supply of the commodity. So because of which what is happening, the shortage of supply, the demand is more than supply, that leads to rise in prices. And the third one, rise in per capita income. So rise in per capita income, this is the general process of economic development. The country is taking, almost all the countries of the world, they are incurring expenditure, or they are in the process of economic development, which results in the gradual increase in the per capita income of the people. So that also leads to rise in demand. Then point D, heavy investment on development projects with long gestation period. So heavy investment, so that economic development in a country can take place one day if the government or even the private party for that matter, if they incur huge expenditure on the developmental projects like the irrigation projects, like the power projects, or the major industries. So all these, the nature of all these investment projects is that one is the investment is very huge, and these are all the projects which are having a long gestation period. Gestation period is the time gap between the production and actually the commodity or the service reaches the market. Okay, so if the time gap is too long, the investment is happening, the production is happening, the money is being pumped in, but then the final commodity or service has not yet arrived in the market. So during this period of time, the money income is there, the circulation of money is there, but the demand is there, but the supply is not there. So that leads to inflation. Point E, increase in the money supply of the economy. So periodical increase in the issue of currency notes by the Reserve Bank of India, or the volume of circulation of money, the money supply in the country will keep on increasing. That happens periodically, which also leads to rise in demand, which leads to rise in prices. And then point F, liberal availability of credit for unproductive economic activities. Liberal availability of credit. So nowadays the banks are giving loans, credit facilities, or to buy the easy installment facilities for almost anything. Okay, not necessarily it has to be for productive purpose. So productive purposes, if the credit is available for any activity that results in production, that results in the volume of goods and services. But then if it is unproductive economic activities, that is to celebrate the birth ceremony, the death ceremony, any festivals, or any to lavishly for the wedding ceremonies or any ceremonies, and these are all the unproductive economic activity that is not resulting in the creation of any goods and services. But still the banks are, see, if the banks are providing credit facilities to all these activities also on liberal terms, on easy terms, then what will happen? Then there will be too much of circulation of money in the country. The money supply will change from one hand to another hand. So the disposable income in the hands of the people will increase, but unfortunately corresponding to that there will not be any production or the supply of goods and services. So that leads to rise in demand and rise in prices of the commodities. And point H, deficit financing by the government. So financing the deficit by the government. What is deficit? Deficit, whenever the public expenditure, that is the government expenditure, is more than public revenue, that is government revenue. What the government does, the government how does the government finance the deficit? Either the government can borrow, or the government can ask the central bank of the country to print more currency notes. So there are ways in which the government will finance the deficit, but that again results in huge volume of circulation of money in the country. The money supply in the country will keep increasing. And then point I, conspicuous spending by people having black money. Conspicuous spending, that is open demonstration effect, openly spending, lavishly spending. See, people are having the black money, so they some outlet should be there, isn't it? So they openly spend it by lavishly spending on either of all these ceremonies, okay, like the wedding ceremonies or any festivals or anything. All these the conspicuous spending, openly spending the black money. Again, what is happening? The money is being pumped into the economy. People are, it is somebody is spending and somebody is receiving the income, isn't it? Somebody is spending the money, somebody is receiving the money. So if somebody is receiving the money, they will automatically demand more goods and services. But will the supply will be in accordance with the rise in the money supply or in the rise in the demand for the commodity? It will not. So that will lead to inflation. And finally, point J, reduction in direct tax rates. So what happens if the government reduces the direct tax rates? Again, people will be having more and more amount of disposable income. So that again leads to, induces them to increase their demand. So all these factors leads to rise in aggregate demand for the commodities. That is, the demand for all the commodities in general will increase, but unfortunately the supply of commodities or services will not increase in correspondence to the rise in demand. That will lead to inflation. Okay. Now the second cause is the factors causing increase in the cost of production. So the cost push inflation. Remember, if you remember the causes of inflation, one is the demand pull inflation. That is the first one we have seen. The second one is the cost push inflation. If the cost of production keeps on increasing, then the price level will also increase. And now what are all the reasons for the cost of production to increase? First one, increase in cost of land, that is rent, and also the other charges, that is the wages and the interest rate. In general, if the prices of the factors of production keep on increasing, then there will be rise in the prices. So inflation actually, slowly the price level will start with the demand pull inflation, and afterwards then it turns into a cost push inflation. Okay. So if the cost of production for the producer keeps on increasing, if the rent he has to pay on land keeps increasing, if the wages he has to pay to the laborers will keep on increasing, if the interest he has to pay on borrowed loans keep on increasing, what will happen? The cost of production for the producer will increase. And what the producer will do if the cost of production increases is profit margin will decrease. So in order to increase the profit margin, he will increase the prices. So if all the producers in the country keep increasing the prices because of the rise in the general cost of production, the inflation will happen. Second one, rise in prices of machinery and raw materials. So because of the shortage, demand is increasing, the producers have to produce more. There will be too much of demand for not only the commodities, but also the machinery that is producing the commodities, but also for the raw materials that is useful in the production of those commodities. So rise in demand for the commodities lead to rise in the demand for machineries or the raw materials that help in the production of those commodities, that is the derived demand. So whenever there is a rise in demand for the machineries or raw materials, automatically the prices of those machineries and raw materials will also increase. That means what? It is nothing but the cost of production is increasing. Then this point C, increase in indirect taxes. So if the indirect tax rates increases, if the producer is charged more and more of taxes in the form of excise duties, what the producer will do, if the government is charging more on the producer, or if the government is charging the indirect taxes on commodities or services, the prices will again increase, isn't it? The price plus tax, that means what? The prices are still increasing. Then excessive wear and tear of machinery and lack of modernization. Excessive wear and tear of machinery because of the old and outdated machinery. So that will, if you are using if the producers are using the efficient machinery, if the producers are using the latest technology, then the wastages will reduce, the cost of production will reduce, the output will be more. But if the producers are using the old and outdated machinery, because of the depreciation of the machinery, then the cost of production will increase but the output will be less. Okay. And then the second point is import of machinery at higher prices. Because of the shortage of machinery, the producers sometimes they have to import the machinery with no other alternative. So whenever they have to import at a higher prices. Okay, because the demand is there, demand for machinery is there. So the prices of the machinery is increasing and they are importing at a higher prices, which is reflecting in the cost of production, high cost of production. That is again reflecting in the high level of prices. Okay. Then the next one is the lack of optimum allocation of resources. Lack of optimum allocation of resources means optimal proper allocation of resources. If the resources are allotted properly, that means what? Maximum output at minimum cost. That will happen, the efficient allocation of resources. If that is happening, then the producers will in the country will be able to produce the maximum output at minimum cost of production. But if there is no proper or the efficient allocation of resources, if there is lack of optimum allocation of resources, that means what? They are wasting the resources, they are not producing the maximum output at minimum cost, they are producing minimum output at maximum cost. Okay, so that again results in inflation. Then point G, devaluation of domestic currency. So sometimes the domestic currency will depreciate in terms of the foreign currency. Okay, so if there's sometimes it happens on its own, or sometimes the government itself will devalue the domestic currency in terms of foreign currency. So this is happening because the country's exports are lesser and the country's imports are more. The country is facing a deficit in the balance of payments. So in order to set right the deficit in the balance of payment, what the country has to do, somehow the country has to see to it that imports are decreasing and the exports are increasing. So that will happen if the country's currency, the domestic currency is devalued. If there is a fall in the value of the domestic currency, then the imports will decrease and the exports will increase. But unfortunately, that will lead to rise in the general price level domestically. Maybe exports and imports will be set right. Okay, but unfortunately that will lead to whenever there is a rise in the price level, the value of the currency will decrease, isn't it? If there is on its own, that is one thing, it is reducing. But on the top of it, if the government devalues the domestic currency in order to set right the balance of payments, the price level will still increase domestically. Okay, and point H, inefficiency in management and lack of control over wasteful expenditure. Because of the too much of expansion of the business, sometimes it will not be possible for the producers to coordinate all the activities. There will be inefficient management and that will all result in wasteful expenditure. So the cost of production is increasing. That is again the producer has to retain that cost of production only by increasing the prices of the commodities or services. So all these are the factors that is resulting in rise in cost of production, which reflects in the rise in the general price level. And the third one, the factors causing inadequate supply. So it is not, there are so many factors that is resulting in shortage of supply of goods and services. So if there is a shortage of supply, that means what, demand is again more than the supply. That will lead to rise in prices. So point A, failure of monsoons, floods, pests, etc. in agriculture. We all know that agriculture is mostly depending upon the nature, isn't it? So if there is a climatic disaster, if the climatic conditions are not favorable, and if the too much, either it is a drought condition or it's a floods, or all these things result in the fall in agricultural production. So primary products is one of the main component when you are calculating the inflation, the general price level. The major weightage is given for the primary products. So if there is a shortage of primary products, that is the agricultural products, that will immediately reflect in the general price level of the country. Okay. The second one, inadequate availability of institutional credit. So there are two types of credit. One is the institutional credit and the non-institutional credit. All the credit that is provided by the banks and other financial institutions recognized by the government, they all come under the category of institutional credit. But all the credit that is provided by the landlords or the money lenders, they all come under the institutional or non-institutional credit. What is the difference here? The non-institutional credit, they charge huge amount of interest. Okay, so why people are going for the non-institutional source of credit? Because of the inadequate availability of institutional credit. Since the institutional credit, the credit facilities provided by the institutional sources like the banks and other recognized financial institutions, they are not up to the mark. The producers, they have to go to the non-institutional credit, especially the farmers and the small scale entrepreneurs. They have to go to the non-institutional sources of credit for investment, for which they have to pay a high rate of interest, which they will not be willing to pay. So what is happening finally? There is lack of investment. So ultimately there is no investment taking place. If there is no investment, the production will not happen. So if the production is not happening, then how there will not be any supply. Okay. Then the third one, inadequate availability of raw materials. According to the rise in demand for the commodities, there is a rise in demand for raw materials. But then the supply of raw materials is not that smooth. Okay. So inadequate availability of raw materials, again, too much of demand for raw materials, shortage of raw materials, that will lead to shortage of supply of raw materials, that will lead to rise in the price of raw materials, and that will lead to rise in the general price level of the country. Point D, underutilization of productive capacity due to power shortage, labor unrest, etc. So if the underutilization of productive capacity, that means the producer is having a certain kind of machineries and everything, so it has to be operated on a full scale, full time the machinery has to be operated, then only the average fixed cost will keep on reducing. But suddenly if there is a power shortage, if there is a labor unrest, protest, riots by the labor, or the laborers are protesting, so if all those things happening, then there will not be continuous production. The machineries, they are all lying idle. So if the machineries are lying idle, the cost of production will keep on increasing. The average cost will keep on increasing. Okay. And then point E, long gestation period of certain industry, which I already explained to you what is the meaning of long gestation period. So most of the industries, especially the heavy industries, the time gap is too much. Okay. So but the investment is huge, but then it will take a long period of time for the commodity to reach in the market. So during this period of time, the landlord has to be paid the rent, the laborers working, they have to be paid the wages, the capitalist from whom the producers have borrowed, they have to be paid the interest. So what is happening? Some people are receiving the money income, but then the final commodity has not reached the market. Okay. Then long gestation period, till that period is over, there will not be any supply in the market. Okay. Then point F, exports at the cost of domestic supply. Sometimes if the producers feel that through export they are getting more remuneration, they will, instead of supplying domestically, they will start exporting the commodity. That will result in shortage of supply domestically. And finally, artificial scarcity due to black marketing. All these traders and hoarders, they will take advantage of this inflationary situation. So they will know that if there is a shortage of supply, the price will rise and they will get more and more amount of profit. So they will take advantage of this and they will start hoarding the commodity. They will create an artificial scarcity in the market so that the prices will rise and their profit margins will increase. Okay, so all these will lead to rise in the general price level of a country. So, but this is not a very good thing. Somehow or the other, the government has to control the inflation, because inflation is having a very adverse effect on majority of the sections of the population, which is the next answer, effects of inflation, which I will explain to you in my next class. Okay, hope you have understood the concept. If you have any doubt, please mention them in the comment box. Otherwise, if you find this answer useful, if you find this video useful, please like, share and also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, so until my next class, take care. Bye bye.